What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome once again to the latest edition of Partner First from OITVOIP. We are having an interesting one today. I actually just called it a few minutes ago. I'm referring to this as the Boogeyman episode, not as a bad thing, but as a good thing. If you haven't been having this conversation, if you haven't been listening to everybody in the industry talking about cybersecurity and the changes in policies, the changes in requirements, I don't know what you've been doing. It's kind of one of those things. It's impossible not to show up on your radar. There's been talks of government regulation and plenty of private groups like Carl Palachuk's group talking about standardizing MSP. And at the end of the day, we want to know how it boils down to the end user, to the end MSP. How does it affect us? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. We have not only a powerhouse in the MSP in the insurance industry. Sorry for the tongue twister. But we also have a real live bona fide MSP and one of my good friends to qualify everything. So it's not just a bunch of theory. We're going to talk practice too. So in line with that, I want to bring on my good friend Dustin from Clear Guidance Partners. Dustin, how you doing, my friend?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself, your role at Clear Guidance? Let us learn about you a little bit.
Yeah, this is actually my second rodeo. I had another MSP that I exited from a couple years ago and started Clear Guidance. Actually started off intending to do CIO consulting, and then the phone started ringing, and here I am, full-blown MSP again 3 years later. We focus mainly on law firms, engineering, manufacturing, and then a lot of companies that have not like your traditional compliance of like HIPAA, things like that, but the law firms, and we've been getting a lot of financial firms that have client compliance. So like my law firm works for Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo sends us a big 50-page questionnaire every quarter. Hey, are you doing this, this, and this? Can you provide proof? Things like that. So my business partner is ex-military, very process-oriented guy. You'd like him. So just kind of keep
He's a good guy.
super organized. So that's kind of where we built our niche on everything. And we are we're in Austin, Texas, and have 25 people now. So it's
Awesome.
been a rocket ship.
And continuing to grow, right?
Yeah,
We're always talking about
not slowing down. So
yeah. And you're hitting the marks of everything I've always been a huge fan of. When people ask, when I talk about the clientele that I used to love going after in my MSP, it was always highly regulated environments, people with a ton of rules, a ton of compliance. Yeah, compliance already jumps to HIPAA and medical. And I'm not saying that's a bad vertical. It's absolutely awesome. It's not the only regulated industry. And so, when you talk about real estate and they have their retention guidelines and legal and they have their ethics and yes, lawyers have ethics guidelines. But, they have all this stuff, they need someone to guide them along, and a smart MSP that's experienced in it and educated in it is the right, I don't want to say person, organization to help guide them. And I think it's funny you got out and got back in anyway, willingly.
Can't quit.
So that says a lot about you personally. So,
good or bad though.
It says something. I don't know, good or bad. It definitely says something. So let's bring on our featured guest, Mr. Reid. There you go. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Ray. How about yourself?
So why don't you tell us about yourself and why you're here today?
So I'm from the insurance world. I guess we'll start there. So I'm out of my element slightly, but I think part of the discussion today is what's bringing my element into your element. So I am the president of FifthWall Solutions. FifthWall has been around since 2015. We came out of a national wholesaler. So we'll explain more about this later, hopefully. But the way the wholesaler's positioned is we have a lot of access to the marketplace. Agents come to us to access that market. For cyber specifically, we wanted to create a company that really honed in on that expertise. So that's all we do. We only do cyber. So over the years, we've honed our ability to not just access, but then also promote. So we've really played a large role in the facilitation of the sale of cyber. Understanding this is a new line of coverage. Agents out there don't know a lot about cyber. They're familiar with GL. They're familiar with work comp. Cyber's a new thing. So not just talking about it, but then helping their clients understand it too. So
And that's kind
we've
of
been
the problem, right? Like it's not. I think you hit the nail on the head, which is why I refer to this as the boogeyman. As MSPs, we focus on the stuff that we can make repeatable, the stuff we can make scalable. As long as we have that standard process, and it doesn't matter if it deviates a little bit, but as long as we know the game we're playing, we can be extremely successful. But like you said, on the insurance world, you have your GL, you have your E&O, you have your hazard. These are things that have been known for decades, right? This is not a surprise to anybody. But if I'm hearing you correctly, cybersecurity, it's kind of, we're not, I don't want to say making it up as we go along, but we're learning and adjusting very quickly.
Absolutely. We came into this thinking we would be successful back in 2016. Okay. And things are very different now than they were in 2016. We were trying to promote something that wasn't being fully understood yet. And when I say promote, I mean just insurance policies, good insurance, good comprehensive insurance. And we quickly learned we had to become the trainer. So I personally wrote multiple CE classes for agents, just kind of going through the basics all the way to the nitty gritty and details of understanding the coverages. But we really had to go through that process with the agents first in order to get it out to the marketplace.
And like we're seeing that, right? Like, so, but it's good to know. It's crazy to think that you guys thought you were going to go into this in 2016, and like, and still to hear 5 years later, we're still adjusting. And I have to imagine last year had a major impact, even more so than what you were expecting, right? Like, because over the last 3-4 years, you're building a learning process. You're adjusting your items, and then COVID hit, and now we're not saying everybody's hyper localized to one site. Everybody is distributed everywhere, and that risk just explodes. How did that impact you guys?
Well, not just for us, I guess. Start first with the agents themselves. I mean, we're working with hundreds of retail agencies across the country, right? And all of them have a similar story where there's a certain portion of their book, we'll say maybe 15 or 20%, that they have been able to have an effective conversation around cyber and cyber insurance, right? But there's the rest that have saying, probably not now, maybe later, or no, not at all, or they're relying on an endorsement on their GL. All of a sudden, right, it flipped, and everyone's coming back because the antennas are going up around the work from home environment. Breaches were coming in. Agents were then getting inundated, and then we're above that. So we all of a sudden, of the hundreds of agents, then we had a multiplier from each agency. So yeah, it was an eye-opening moment. So we 2020 was an adjustment, but then of course the beginning of this year was probably the larger adjustment with the more drastic changes in underwriting. We really started to see the clear impact of ransomware events from the previous year. What was happening to capacity in the insurance market. So it really was shifting. The entire market just started to harden like crazy.
And in line with that, I was talking to Dustin the other day about, he had one of these experiences where, so our biggest concern, right? Our biggest concern in the industry on the MSP side is talking, because at the end of the day, the insurance company holds all the cards, right? The underwriter holds all the cards of we will or we will not pay out should something happen, and setting the guidelines and all that. And like we just discussed, it's a moving target. On the MSP side, it's, are they qualifying the questions properly, right? So in PCI, we have this too, right? They're saying, well, make sure your firewall is blocking this, and security best practice is not to block, it's to drop. So they don't even know you're there. But if you do that, then you're not going to pass a PCI assessment. It's the most ridiculous thing. In the MSP world, Dustin, we were talking the other day, you were doing one where they weren't differentiating between RDP and RD gateway, right? I mean, how frustrating is that for an MSP?
It is, and that's been one of the parts kind of where Reid and I were actually connected. I saw Jeremy join the chat. He's the one that introduced us several months ago. But part of where I started looking for someone was talking to your typical agent is they don't know anything about cyber. They're sitting there doing, employee comp insurance. That's their main thing. So it's like, oh, I can get you this cyber thing. We get something like that. They don't know what any of that stuff is. So as we're looking and talking to more people, having to help our clients with their insurance policies, is whenever that stuff comes up, like Reid actually he probably can't set up a remote desktop gateway, but I can at least say, okay, like, look, this is different from the insurance agency. So that was a situation that we're actually working through with Reid, and we're going to be able to go back and at least get more info from the insurance agency, hopefully, on, you know, what's going on, versus, you know, your typical broker is going to go, well, I don't know, that's what they told me. So that's been the big advantage on. I've been looking for Reid for like a couple years now, of somebody that gets the cyber side and can sit down and actually explain it. Which, you know, it's
We
new,
all
it
have,
changes,
man.
so. But
No,
yeah, so that was a
but that's
specific
important
go
though.
today.
That, you know, we talk about the networking, we talk about the relationships, we talk about, you know, the people that, because there's so many industries and there's going to be more that impact the MSP world. Having those relationships, having those conversations for the people that can have the understanding, that is so important. And that's exactly, if anybody's wondering why I would talk about insurance on a partner first, besides the fact that it affects us all, is there's a lot of people out there in the insurance world. There's a lot of people attacking not attacking MSPs, but going after the market. Today, you know, Reid's one of the first people I've spoken to that actually understands the industry. And again, like Dustin's saying, he's not going to go set up your RD gateway for you. That's not the goal. The goal is that you can have an intelligent conversation. And when something happens, he can walk you through the wheres and the whys and the hows and to navigate it intelligently. And I think as MSPs, that's what we really need in the industry. I refer to them as the friends of the industry. So Reid, without much further ado, and speaking of friends of the industry, I'll give a quick shout out to Jeremy over here at Blue Mira. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Is it Blue Mira? We'll do a partner first, so we'll figure that out. But Jeremy's been all over as well, so thanks for joining, man. So we got here. I started working with Reid because he's trying to make his insured parties more secure, not just ensure his policies make their margin. It's that intelligent conversation we keep going back to. I'm going to keep on that. But Reid, you have some stuff to share with us today. You mind if I go ahead and bring up
Yeah. I thought it would be helpful, especially since, you know, this is the boogeyman conversation. I wanted to just peel back the layer a bit, help folks see, okay, why are you experiencing what you're experiencing now and you weren't experiencing this 6 months ago or a year ago? Like, why is this changing on the insurance side? So all of a sudden, if an application's hitting your desk or you're trying to help, you know, fill this out, or maybe you have a client and they're all of a sudden saying, well, our renewal went up, 5x, or all of a sudden we're not able to get a new cyber policy. What's happening? So I want to just kind of peel back that layer. So FifthWall, as I mentioned, we only focus on cyber in the insurance space. So that's one thing that makes us unique, is that we're not generalistic. We made this decision early on, and that's where we have stayed. And even back in 2015, it may not have seemed like the best idea, but today we're happy we've decided on maintaining that path. Where we are in the ecosystem, just to kind of help visualize this, is we're not a broker. Like, we broker products, but think of us, we facilitate with agents. So we have agents that come to us. They're looking for products. They're looking for a number of reasons. Maybe they don't have access to their smaller agency. They don't have access to the markets they want to have access to. They need help, facilitating the sale. They need help comparing coverages. So we are a conduit that goes up into the marketplace. Okay. So the process that agents come to us to rely on is simplicity. They come to us with information. They say, hey, FifthWall, here's my client. Can you go up into the sky, right? Have the conversation you need to have. I need to understand who's actually interested in writing an insurance policy for my client, right? And what's it going to look like and what's it going to take? So for a long time, that wasn't complicated. We had, and this is going to sound crazy, but most industries could be underwritten and assigned premium by just their revenue and their industry. And if they had a website, that's a bonus. But you had a lot of policies going out there that was it. And that was when the market was really soft. That's not the case anymore. We've now gotten to a point where 2018 started to creep in. We started to see more claims. Into 2019, ransomware started to become more of a thing. We had rates that were too low, underwriting that wasn't really great at all. Ransomware started to exist more and more, and the claims handling on the back end was really costly. We had a lot of carriers, and we still do, that put in a process that really wasn't managing dollars well. They were putting in third-party services like legal and forensics way early. on the IR side, and slowly but surely we saw the market harden, and then all of a sudden it flicked. So you may have noticed this in late 2020, early 2021. All of a sudden there's this shift on insurance, on cyber insurance. Rates are going up like crazy, appetites are becoming limited, and then the application process is getting more and more complicated. In my opinion, it's getting to where probably it should have been to begin with, but it's a very sudden shift. And so agents right now are kind of caught in the crosshairs. This is a topic that's not exactly comfortable to begin with, but now it's getting more and more complicated.
So let me ask you. So it strikes me, I see a lot of similarities, right? We saw this with the housing market with mortgages, right? Mortgages were really easy to write, and then you had all this stated, and then the housing crash, and then suddenly everything's documented and much more complicated. You don't have that that garbage or the grocery bagger making $250,000 a year buying that $500,000 house.
Right.
It seems to me insurance kind of passed that same way. Like you said, you have an income, you have time in industry, maybe a website, here's your policy. Is that an effect on because of the maturity of the time in industry and as you guys just grow and evolve and that's what happened? Or is it because of the payouts and all the ransomware events and all that? What spurred that change into how you guys were qualifying these policies?
Yeah, and I both, honestly, right? I mean, we have an industry. If you look at insurance is it's one of the old. It's old. It's hundreds of years old, right? And you've got these lines of coverage that have been around forever, and there's actuarial science that has existed for at least decades for most lines of coverage, right? And this is data that is being relied upon time and time again to establish rates, right? And there is a cleaner and clearer understanding with cyber, even though it's been around for a couple decades. It's brand new now. Cyber insurance is about a decade old. For insurance, that is brand new. So yeah, that's certainly part of it.
But hold on,
all
I
of
gotta ask you something. You're saying cyber policies have been around for decades?
Technically, the first cyber policies existed in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Wow.
Yeah.
A, that makes me feel old. B, I didn't think about that.
Now they weren't great.
Yeah, well,
in case SQL Slammer got you or whatever it was. I'm trying to think of the oldest virus I can.
I'm just trying to think. Like, I know I was hit with Melissa at one point. Like, I'm trying to think. Like, could that have been paid out? No, that actually I heard love letters still going around today. I mean, that was kind of blew my mind. Wow, that's pretty interesting. On your last slide, you had something MGC. What was that? What is that?
MGA, so managing general agents. So these are there's a lot of companies out there that are have underwriting authority. Okay, so they're not necessarily the carrier, but they can represent the carrier. So they've been given that authority, and they're writing business for that carrier. So they can even relabel it as they see fit. They put their name in front of the carrier, whether it's Axis or Hudson or Travelers, whomever it may be. But they're more program managers.
So if I understand the ecosystem here, we have the agent who's talking to the end user, writing the policy, gathering documentation, and then the next step up from there is whom?
So you have agents that can go directly to markets, directly to the marketplace, to carriers. The way that works can differ. A lot of markets will be exclusive based on volume, based on industries. So you can't, as an agent, you can't always access the markets you want to. It's not that simple. So for certain types of risks, certain types of businesses, they'll use the wholesale market. All right, and they'll go to those that can. So we have the ability to then go to the marketplace on their behalf and go up. And actually, that's what allowed us when we were sitting there. It's a very unique position because we get to see dozens of different markets, dozens of forms, dozens of applications, and how they've changed and evolved over time, right? Because we're experiencing them every single day, right? All these different markets. So it's been really, it's fascinating for us, and that's what we want to try to leverage, is just that position that we're seeing. We're facilitating the process, but we're also sitting there watching, or watching this all go by. So.
And that perspective is really where, you know, the gold happens, right? Like the perspective that you get to see everything that's going on, and that gives you a more keen understanding of the industry and maybe able to read the tea leaves a little bit to you know, prognosticate where it's going.
Yeah,
and
ask a lot of hard questions too.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate. Yeah, just because I don't want, you know, I'm not asking for anybody here to go get licensed at the end of the day. That's not the goal out of this webinar. But it's more, you know, understand who the players are, understand what the process could be more intelligent be more educated in the conversations you're having with your clients as the MSPs. Be more understanding of the vendors you're working with so that you can speak a little more intelligently, ease the process along, because as Dustin can attest to, some of these policies, some of these questionnaires are getting kind of verbose. You know.
Yeah, I was going to say too, like somebody like FifthWall comes into play is, you know, we'll have in the past, we're, you know, trying to push all of our clients to talk to Reid at this point, but, you know, we'll talk to the agent, for example, and again, going back, you know, they're, oh yeah, I know workers' comp really well, but a lot of times they'll have somebody like FifthWall that is on the cyber side, and those people are typically where we would see them pulled into the conversation. So there's usually somebody behind the agent, has been my experience, that kind of knows that line of business, so to speak, cyber insurance in this case. And they're,
and I imagine that makes it easier.
Yeah.
Right. I imagine that makes the process flow a lot more smoothly when you have somebody knowledgeable like Reid guiding the conversation along.
Oh, yeah. Because a lot of the agents, and I don't mean this as a shot at the agents, but, you know, most of them just don't know cyber. They don't understand it at all. So whenever you do start digging in, trying to get a better rate, things like that, that's where those guys, you know, get the help.
Yeah. I mean, not to give anybody a pass, but it's not, you know, we're not talking about it's been this way for 20, 30, 40 years, right? If you can't, if your agent can't find you the right GL policy, you need to find a new agent. But like, you know, as Reid said in the very beginning, this has been a moving target. So, you know, find the most knowledgeable, because it sounds like there's very slim pickings right now. And that's where Reid comes in, right? Because Reid, I understand you can actually work with any agent to educate them. You know, and that's a big distinction too, because you're not selling the end user policy. You're working with the agent or signing up an agent to help. So any MSP that already has that agent that may not be working with FifthWall can. So you can still take advantage of this.
Yeah, we facilitate, right? So we're the expert to hold the hand in whatever ways we need to hold the hand. And it's been recent that we've, you know, and I brought up this slide because there's a lot of moving parts in the conversation, right? And what we acknowledged, and this would have been 6-8 months ago, was that right when the application processes started changing, it got to the point that the client, you know, they're working with their agent, but the agent's being bombarded with changes, and we're facilitating that. But the get-go, the agent's not coming from a place of stability, right? They're coming from a place where this is a very volatile market. The underwriting's changing, the applications are getting more complex. The MSP, though, it was inconsistent. That was one thing that was, there was a big difference when there was a facilitative effort, not just with us, but when an MSP, or if there was internal IT, just got involved in the beginning. So that was when Dustin and I started talking, and it was this kind of light bulb moment where it was, okay, now FifthWall can kind of move wherever we want through the process on the agent side. We want to help in whatever ways we can, get good products, help the agent. But if we're already talking to the MSP and we've already kind of established, okay, this is how it works, we're able to have a much smoother process. And the MSP can provide really good value too, because it's a conversation that really needs to be happening. And it's not always happening on the insurance side. So we started doing that with Dustin, and it's gone really well. Is just being able to facilitate that and move folks along through the understanding, but then also look at products in real time.
Yeah, one of the reasons I introduced you two guys to see if we wanted to make this happen was, you know, everybody talks about being trusted advisor. Like Reid has been such an awesome win for us on clients to where cyber insurance comes up and it's like, okay, let me talk to, you know, let me get Reid involved. One of the problems we've historically had is, okay, like let's go over these sublimits. And the agent's like, oh, I don't know. You know, legally, I don't think you're allowed to talk about it if you're not an agent, but also I don't know. So Reid will actually sit down there and break down and be like, okay, you know, We had one the other day where he was like, look, this is not a normal, this is way below the industry standard on this sublimit. You should be able to ask for it, get this raised for almost nothing. And it was, something, it was like social engineering or something like that. Things like that. And I think, Reid, we've done six or seven policies now in the last couple of months. And every one of my clients has come back afterwards and been like, oh my God, thank you. That's the easiest insurance experience I've ever gone through. Like, we feel like we can sleep at night on the cyber side. And I mentioned before, like, Reid's the guy I've been looking for. He makes me look good. And then also, it's great having somebody that can tell us, yes, this is the right coverage and here's why.
So I want to get your opinion, because I see a lot of opinions that go out. Some, if you listen to the Gary Pikas, he'll sit there and say you have to have every one of your clients have to have a cyber policy. If not, they can't be your clients. You see other MSP advocates and coaches or whatever, for lack of a better term, saying you need to actually be reviewing these policies. And where do you stand in your MSP, Dustin? Like, how involved do you get?
We require it. It's written into our contracts. As of this year, we kind of had a soft requirement before, but not contractual. So in our contracts now, it's if you don't have a cyber policy, then we have zero liability. That's written straight up into there. But the other part too is like we're trying to, I mentioned earlier, like with the compliance stuff, is on a weekly basis, we're having to go through like due diligence questionnaires, stuff like that. So, we're constantly evaluating and kind of quantifying risk for our clients. So we use the the NIST cybersecurity framework. So running through the identify and all that stuff, all the way to respond, which is the important one here, to where it's like cyber insurance is the #1 bullet on respond. When that incident hits, like, okay, we need the incident response, we need the forensics people. Earlier, Reid had kind of mentioned lightly on the the legal discovery side. We had a co-managed client get breached recently. Excuse me. And I say co-managed specifically because it was that the internal IT guy did something really dumb that, kind of table stakes security ended up resulting in a breach.
What was it? MFA? You can say if it was MFA.
It was MFA. So
it's always MFA.
It's always MFA. One person's mailbox got breached. And what happened is that they sent out a bunch of spam email. So, okay, no big deal. That's locked down. But then afterwards was looking at it. It's like, okay, we can see on the logs that the person had access to this. It was a secretary at a law firm. They had access to her email box. Well, she had 6 different lawyers that she worked for doing all these big deals. So now where all the expenses come, we're involved every step of the way. So it's okay. The law firm's involved from the incident response. The forensics people to go in and see what was in there. And then now it's like, okay, we can't say that it wasn't extracted, the data. So we have to assume it was extracted. So now we're doing discovery on it to see what sensitive stuff was in there, and then notifications and all that. So this one little breach and it was like 15 minutes before we had sensors go off that somebody had logged in, and done something. 15-minute breach on a secretary that was a bunch of ultimately harmless spam, but the bill is up to like $250,000, and it's all that other stuff on the end of it. So that's really, to me, where God forbid the full ransomware incidents and stuff, but it's the little stupid things like that end up just costing when they're done right. And not every client's going to want to make a claim and deal with it, but and the insurance is covering it all, to be clear. But it's that kind of stuff is where the cyber insurance comes in use.
So that's a concern that gets brought up often, right? There's always that tingling fear. I have my policy. I'm paying for my policy. They approve my policy. Is it going to pay out when I really need it? Because there's always that fear that we missed that one thing, or we didn't do that one thing appropriately, and it's not going to pay out. Can you speak to that a little bit, Reid? I mean, how? I know I don't want you to say your policy is absolutely going to get paid out, but is that happening? Are insurance companies finding reasons not to pay out, or are they qualifying it appropriately at the onset?
No, it's a good question. And actually, Dustin and I just discussed this recently, because it was Reid, cyber insurance is a bad rap in our industry. Like it's often looked at as garbage. We don't, sometimes it's getting paid out, sometimes it's not. And my first response was, what type of coverage are you looking at? Like, are you actually looking at a standalone insurance policy? Or are you looking at it it has the word cyber on it, but it's attached to their general liability policy, and it's this endorsement. And those endorsements have been around for a long time. And they are, I mean, they're a security blanket, but they're very, very small. Like, the coverages are sublimited to purposely not pay out claims in some instances. And so in those instances, yes. So I just want to make sure there's a clarification. When we're talking about those endorsements, I mean, it's not something that should be relied on. They're low limits, and they sublimit a lot of primary coverages that are really important, and they exclude some things that are also important, versus a standalone policy in its sole purpose is for cyber, right? That's what it does. So on that side of the fence, actually, yeah, we see, I mean, I'd say 95% of the time we see claims getting paid. It's changing though, because there is some conditional language that's always been in there that
Right.
now carriers are starting to, I mean, because they have to. I mean, the capacity shrinking, they're trying to do their best to stay afloat. They want to keep a positive book of business, I understand. And so they're finally going back through some of that contractual language and saying, okay, like, is there room to deny this claim? Where before I was not seeing that much.
So, and I want to touch a little bit on the post incident, or the post breach or post incident response. And if you guys, I want to bring up real quick, if you have questions on how to handle incident response, we've done not one but two different awesome tabletops. Simon will put the links in chat and on the screen. Check out Jurassic Sock and Rogue One, both on our YouTube channels, where we went over exactly this: how to handle post breach. But Reid, I want to ask you, incident happens, the proverbial stuff hits the fan. How adept are the carrier, or who's getting involved on the insurance side? Because that's what we've been advising: contact your insurance provider immediately.
Mm-hmm.
How involved are they getting? Do they have guidelines already as an industry on how to respond, or is each entity kind of making it up as they go along? Where are you guys falling on this?
Yeah, it's not standardized. So let's just start with that. So where you look at other lines of coverage, there has been a well-established path for many, many years. It is not the case with cyber. Each market does have their own, we'll call it path, right? So whenever an event happens and IR's going, it's starting to look similar, let's say that. And I can describe that. So the similarities are this: typically you have a third party. There's a couple different companies that do this, but they're meant to be the first phone call. And they're simply doing intake and kind of stop the bleeding, right? From there, it's hitting legal. And this is actually where we're seeing, and this is my personal opinion, but I know many share this opinion. It's a very broken practice, because immediately you've got a very expensive claim, because you've got legal, you got billable hours, and 9 times out of 10, they're going to want to trigger forensics because that's their process. And that's the path that it typically follows. So that phone call, and I'll stop there. That will differ by the policy. And I do think it's really important, particularly since MSPs are probably going to be the first phone call, right? And do we call our insurance? To already have that understanding is really good to have. And a lot of times it's not that complicated of a path. It's just, where do we need to go first? Because even on policies that, they're coming through FifthWall, there's a path. And 50% of the time, sometimes they're calling the carrier directly when they weren't supposed to. They're not going through proper IR because, or maybe they've already started the process of doing data restoration or whatever it may be, but is that actually going to be reimbursed? So understanding kind of what is the pecking order is really important.
And one thing we've done.
No, go ahead, man. No.
One thing that we've done is everybody has incident response plans for their clients, right? Is we ask them for, if they have the existing policy on a new client, okay, hey, can we get a copy of your policy? We want to pull the incident response info out of it. So whenever we write that IR plan, it's in there, pick up the phone, or there's a couple carriers that it's email only, which blows my mind. But, here's the contact info, here's the policy number, the name on the policy. Basically, here's the kind of high level of how to start an IR claim with your cyber insurance. We keep a copy of that IR plan, and then we tell the client, have the CEO and the CFO print out a copy, keep it at home. So when your network gets ransomed, you can open up a claim and you're not sitting there going, oh crap, the policy was on our network drive that's now ransom. Small thing,
Are
but
the insurers or the carriers having any kind of review of that IR policy? Are they having any kind of input?
We have in a couple cases, yes. Not very common. Reid could probably speak better to that than me, but anecdotally, I can think of twice with our clients where that's come up of them wanting to see IR documentation.
So that brings up an interesting question that came up in the chat. I'm going to give you the respect of not even trying to pronounce the name. I'm sure it's something very beautiful and elegant, but the question is, and we'll preface this with, I'm sure it's your mileage may vary, depends, blah, blah. So please don't hold Reid to this exact answer, but what liability do you legally have as the MSP if the client has cyber insurance and gets breached? Will the insurance company seek restitution from the MSP?
So that's a really good question. And actually, if I don't want to redirect that question to a different topic, but there's a topic I think that's underneath that is what policy should you have as an MSP? Because what's a likely scenario that what will actually happen there? And it's not going to be that the carrier or the insurance company is going to be going after the MSP. It would be a situation where the client would come back, right? And more specifically, you would have an E&O, an error and omission, right? So there's a situation where whether or not it's true, and you have done every single thing that you know to do, and you have said every single thing that you know to say, the client has an emotional response, right? And it's, I want to file suit against you because apparently you didn't do your job in my eyes, right? You didn't do this. So you have yes, there is a liability there. That happens a lot. And that's why there's specific policies out there. You don't just want to have, as an MSP, have a cyber policy. You got to have a tech E&O policy that actually has cyber included. And you don't want those to be separated. But having that, that's the level of protection you want to have when we're talking about liability. If that makes sense. Ray, I think you're muted.
It's a Zoom, so it's a live stream, so of course I have to be muted at some point, right? But that's the law of COVID in the new norm. But that's kind of the problem here, right? It becomes this quagmire because it's not just a single policy, it's not just a single set of endorsements. It's you have the GL, you have the E&O, you have the cyber, you have all these things, and sometimes from different carriers in many cases, and so you become a little, I know in my case becomes a little tentative, right? Like as a voice provider, we absolutely have policies that guard against, or protect us against, fraud and other events that could, have a major financial impact for us besides the cyber, besides all the other fun stuff. But, one of the things you're always worried about when it happens as a business owner is the finger pointing and where things are going to land. I know with medical insurances, there's a pecking order when it comes to who's going to pay what in what order. Is there any kind of construct when it comes to that with business insurances?
I mean, there's the most conflict that I've seen, and again, I'm only on the cyber side, so just a disclaimer there. So I'm not,
right.
Steeping myself in the other lines of coverage, but we see, there will be overlapping policies at times, and the other insurance provision in those policies, both of them are going to be pointing to each other, right? You're going to have, but some are specifically written as secondary, some are specifically written in primary, and that's where it really does behoove all businesses to understand that pecking order, because in our world, I guess the only other thing that we would see crossover would be like crime policies, right? You've got a crime policy that may be covering social engineering, for example, or electronic theft, and that's new, but it does exist. And so you're going to have overlapping coverages. That's where you do want to have a good understanding of like, where are we going to first? Because I want to have, as the client, I want to have a clean line. I want to go here and I want to be taken care of. I don't want to go here and then they're trying to go over here and they're fighting between who's actually going to take care of me, right? So that's not exactly a clear answer, but we're if you have a good policy, right? This is really what it comes down to. If you have a good policy, the good policy is going to have it very clearly defined what that looks like. And there shouldn't be conflict on a pecking order there. If that makes sense.
Okay. That's reasonable.
Yeah. And
I have another.
I was just
Go ahead,
going to
man.
say real quick, just kind of real world, knock on wood, I've been doing this 10 years now and never had a client go after us for that kind of thing. But, that was sort of, I mentioned earlier, we're constantly quantifying risk on things is I want my clients to have a policy. So hopefully it does cover if or when we screw up. But then also, Reid was talking about the tech E&O is we carry a pretty substantial policy on that side also, just for, I feel like on that, it's going to be a when, not if sort of thing too, that at some point a client's going to get ticked off and come after you, but kind of having that, I don't want to say double insurance, but protected on both sides of it for when that happens.
So I see another question here from David. Or actually not question, anecdote. We had a non-contract customer need help recovering ransomware almost 2 years ago with $50K as their GL sublimit on cyber. And they used it up, which brings always the question of limits, right? Like, I know this is your mileage may vary, so we're trying to keep it as general as possible for the audience. But do you have any kind of metrics as to like what coverage limits companies should look for based on certain factors, or how is that determined?
Yeah, the industry's gotten to a pretty consistent place on this. And I think one thing is my stance is you can certainly underinsure this. It's actually getting harder to overinsure it because getting higher limits is becoming more difficult. So what we are seeing, and when I say comprehensive, and this is something that sidebar, we can have this conversation if anyone wants to talk about, like, what are you talking about when you use the word comprehensive? But in our world, it's the full aggregate limit is $1 million, right? And then the question is, how many sublimits exist? So what is not at the full aggregate limit? A year or 2 years ago, it was very different. But since the market hardened and now we're getting, I think, some more consistencies, we're typically seeing a full limit on most coverages, except when we get into crime. And when I say crime, I'm talking about social engineering, electronic theft, telecommunications theft, things where there's actual funds that are stolen or funds that are mishandled or a employee is tricked, right? That's where we're seeing sub limits. And that's where I think I'll use the word acceptable, mostly because the industry hasn't really gone above a certain point. And that's usually about 25% of the aggregate premium is what we're generally seeing.
And I want to emphasize too, Reid said should. The policy we did recently was I showed him the client's existing one and he was like, dude, all these are at, it's $1 million policy, but it's a bunch of $100,000 sublimits. That's not normal. So they're out there. That came up just the other day.
And I mean, I imagine there's just like anything else, just like with RAM, right? There's a line where you start getting diminishing returns on, what you're paying out in terms of premiums. Is there? I mean, we review MSAs, we review security policies, we review IR policies and procedures. Are you doing cyber policy reviews when you're having these conversations if they have something existing?
Absolutely. Is that for Dustin or myself?
Oh, it's for yourself. I don't care what Dustin says. It's for you. No, it's for you, Reid. Sorry.
Yeah. So what we're doing right now, and we've been doing this for agents for years now. I mean, we've got agents that come to us and saying, hey, can you compare this? I see apples and oranges. Can you make it apples and apples? We just need a quick, how does this look compared to this? That's probably our biggest, I don't want to say selling point, but that's like how we've broken through so many barriers for agents and then in clients. It's like, put it in black and white, because the policies themselves too, they don't speak the same language. They're using different terms for the same thing. And so we took that and actually, Dustin, I'll use you. That's what we started doing with Dustin, because Dustin was asking that same question, and it was, okay, well, why don't we just go ahead and we can be on the back end for you. If the request is, hey, we want our clients to be carrying the right insurance, and they're going, well, I don't know if we have the right insurance, and Dustin's going, I don't know either. We said, well, we'll just apply that same thing. So we've been doing reviews. So we're actively doing reviews right now through MSPs. It's a good service, but it should be done. It's just, where do you stand? And where do you need to go moving forward?
So when it comes to these policies, Matt brings up an interesting point here, and I'm going to expand on his question. His original question is written, do you need separate policies for bring your own device, BYOD? Should the MSPs require the customer to have a policy for this, specifically thinking of the recent iOS security flaws? And I will, as an Android user, I'll point out, Apple never has security flaws. So I don't know what you're talking about. But but seriously though, when it comes down to this, we think of this stuff, we think of cyber, we think of breaches are obvious, right? Malicious intent is obvious. Having, somebody come in, having a vindictive employee exit and take data with them, that data exfiltration, those are the obvious ones that we think about this normally. But are you seeing a lot of these, and the events I'm speaking of specifically are events where they're engaging the carrier, making a claim on their cyber policy. Are you seeing a lot of this come out because of these ancillary issues that come up, because of these security flaws, these, or like the recent Fortinet, VPN user list that was with the passwords that were released? Are you seeing stuff come out of that, or is it more so around the breaches and pissed off employees? Like, what are the events you're seeing? I guess if I could make this more succinct, what are the events you're seeing spawning these claims most recently?
Yeah, so I mean, ransomware is at the very top. I mean, that's what we're seeing a lot. But what has been true for now, and it's been true for probably 2-3 years, is employee error related claims. So social engineering has kind of always been at the top. There's consistently ones where it's the really basic, someone clicks on something they shouldn't, and or they've been duped. So those are the crime side we've been seeing a lot more. Ransomware has been one though where it's really affected the industry, not just because of the ransomware event and the crisis management, but then you're going to have, if there's business interruption coverage, then you're going to have a business interruption claim too. And so
Yeah,
that's kind of an all-time high as well.
that's kind of the thing, right? Like, you see, the flaw itself may not be the big deal, but the malicious activity that happens because of making use of the flaw. I don't think the flaw is really the triggering factor. It's some malicious actor out there sent an email and somebody clicked a phishing email, didn't think about it, and suddenly the device is hijacked. And again, it can't be an Apple device. It has to be an Android device. I do want to ask, BYOD, has that complicated things? I mean, again, we're going through, prior to 2020, yeah, work from home was a thing, and some companies did it. HP was probably the biggest, where they killed the work from home and they swapped it around. But 2020 kind of just leveled the playing field for everybody. Everybody went distributed. Has that had a major impact on the way the policies are written and applied?
It hasn't changed how policies are written. I think it's to be seen still on the response, but I went through this. So in 2020, I mean, we put together a lot of webinars. I actually think we even did a CE class on this. Like, I actually wrote a class on with this as a main topic, how are you looking at your policy to understand, is it actually going to respond, right? And so through our analysis, I mean, again, I'm using the word comprehensive, but if you're using the right policy, like if you have a policy, because a cyber event can happen in so many different ways, and it can affect businesses in so many different ways. Cyber policies have a lot of different coverage lines. Okay, they're supposed to. This is an instance of, if you have a good policy, this should be covered, because it's, when we get into defining a network, right? And that definition on the policy for network, is it including BYOD? Is it including those devices? Is it including, what's that definition? And most aren't excluding it. And in most cases, it needs to fall in favor of the insured. So whenever we saw that, really wasn't much of an adjustment that we saw, but it was clarification that needed to be made. Okay, whenever we look at these definitions, is this actually going to be covering or not? So we did see a lot of that, and being able to determine if this is a policy that's going to come through, or if it's a policy that's going to fall flat.
And Reid, could we see that, like, on whenever you're talking about hardening? And I know, you and I have been running into more underwriting stuff. Like, would that be an example that we might be seeing next year that they start asking about up front? Maybe not that specifically, but that kind of thing.
Yeah, what we're seeing right now, and I'm assuming a lot of folks are already aware of this, but what's really holding the most weight right now is MFA, segregated backups, and next gen AV. I mean, that's, these are the basics that they're looking for. But and EDR is on there, but it depends on the carrier if they're actually putting a lot of weight on that question. We were not seeing the underwriting be so stringent on these measures 8 months ago. 6 months ago. And some of these questions were already on the application. Okay, now all of a sudden there's more weight to these questions, and so it's tough for me to say that one's going to be more heavily weighted than another in the future. But I think finally we're getting to a place where these applications, the underwriters are getting more strict on it. But when you're coming from a place where they were only looking at revenue and industry, like it's finally getting probably to a place where they should have been, right, all along. They're playing catch up, to be honest.
So I want to ask a quick question here, and we're at the 5-minute warning mark, so we'll be respectful of everybody's time. And of course, we will list Reid's contact information as well as Dustin's afterward if you want to reach out to Reid or Dustin, get his perspective on things. But we'll put that up there. But Mike is asking, can the insurance company dictate who they want to do the remediation?
Sometimes, yes. So they have approved vendors, and I have seen it happen multiple times where a client, went ahead with either internal IT or with an MSP and started to do remediation, assuming the insurer would come in after the fact and reimburse. And there was more strict, there was a more strict outline from the carrier on how things had to be going through, and they didn't get paid back, right? Some are very specific. They only want to use their own approved vendors. Okay. And some are not. So not to give a non-answer, but it does matter to know that, though. It does matter to know if this is a carrier that's going to want to use their own in-house or their own in third parties, or are okay with having someone else come in and they're going to be reimbursed later.
Awesome. So I want to ask one last thing, and this is for me, not from the audience, but one of the big things is, if you're requiring stuff like next gen AV, if you're requiring stuff like, MFA, which segregated backups obviously should be, that's not the question. Have you guys worked on not just saying, do you have this, but making sure that the security awareness training and education component has the insurance industry had any kind of, have they looked to having any kind of impact on that? Because as MSPs absolutely are all about user training to varying degrees of success, but it's a priority. Have the insurance companies kind of weighed in here, or are they looking to?
Yeah. If you go to any standalone policy somewhere, if you've purchased it in the past year, cybersecurity awareness training is probably provided in there. Okay. For free. And it's probably really bad. And it requires you to look and find it, and then for somebody to manage it and implement it. And so, yes, they've taken some measures to go in that direction. It's not to the point where it's like it's being required. Now we're getting that. Actually probably would have been a better answer for your last question, Dustin. That's probably the next thing, as far as being able to validate and prove that it's actually being done. So they've dipped their toes in the water to an extent, in a very lazy way. I'm not going to name names specifically, but it's in there. Yeah. It's just not actually real value. People aren't utilizing it.
Okay, but you say that, and I say, well, MSPs, your value can easily be impressed there, saying, look, this stuff is there. We can help you get there with maybe a little bit better materials because we have tons of stuff available to us. Jeremy brings up a good point, and Jeremy has a little bit of experience in the security realm, saying it's okay to reach out and make sure your preferred IR firm will be covered by the policy. If not, ask what it would take to get them set up so they can become preferred. If you have that, and it goes back to what I said at the very beginning, if you have that preferred relationship, if you have that with your agent, with whomever, making sure you're talking to people that not only know the business, but know you as well, and you can have a good conversation, try to leverage those whenever possible. And with that, I think that's a good spot to close out. Reid, Dustin, thank you so much for your times today, guys. Definitely enlightening. The time actually flew by a lot faster than it would. I will say I was thinking, okay, we're going to talk insurance. Let's, hopefully it wasn't going to get too dry. But honestly, this was thoroughly educating, and I appreciate both of you. Reid, anything you want to share with our audience before we let you go? What's next?
Sure. For us, we really do want to form partnerships in the MSP world. So just like we're doing for Dustin right now, we really want to be able to partner with those that are out there that are security focused. And for us, it's a great way to not only apply new policies, but work with new agents. But we really want to provide value to MSPs out there that are looking to, I guess, leverage this, because I do think there's a lot of ways to leverage this, to use it to your advantage. So everything from doing side-by-side comparisons, rate analysis, actually review the policies for your clients, actually, lay out what does the IR look like on these policies. A lot of what we talked about, we can, take that from insurance language and turn that into real people language. So.
Awesome. And Dustin, my friend, besides being, all around the social circles, what's next for you, man?
Keep growing, keep bringing Reid in to get these insurance policies nailed down. Like I said, this has been on the, sales and just continuing operations with clients. This has been probably our biggest win, partnering with Reid so far in 2021. It's the cyber security is on everybody's mind, and this is a different tact from, going in and saying, oh, what AV are you using, stuff like that. So being able to have, I got an expert, this guy can tell you exactly what you need on your policy and what you have. That's a pretty big differentiating thing for us here lately.
Absolutely. So whether I see you on MSP or our MSP, if I see you on, 1.0, if I see you on MSP Geek, I don't want to hear any MSPs crying about cyber policies and how difficult they are and how much they don't understand it, because you have resources now. Reid is there. He will educate and help you. I don't want to hear any whining.
There's a link too, if that makes things easier. So if you want to talk to us and you want an easy way, it's just our website /MSP. It's in the chat, and I think it's in the description. So
absolutely. So we have that sliding by. Speaking of what's next, Simon, can you tell us what's coming on?
Yeah, so we do have a few events in the next couple of weeks. So next week on Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to be in Whitney, New Jersey for the ASCII Small Business IT Success Summit. I'll be there with El Ambassador, Shalardo. So if you guys want to come talk to us, take a picture, and let's talk. On 9/29, we're going to have another partner first on cybersecurity. So phishing, is your business prepared for the next big attack? That will be with Miles Walker Graphics. On 9:30, we're going to have our Tech Bar podcast, episode 26, Rob Ray of Datto. On October 13th at 1 p.m., we'll have another partner first webinar. This will be a sales and marketing presentation with Brian Lee of Unitrends MSP and Sean Lardo. And then at the end of the month, on the 27th and the 28th of October, we're going to be at the ASCII Small Business IT Success Summit in Orlando, Florida. So we hope to see you guys there.
So hopefully you guys understood what he was saying. It's Florida. We're in Miami. If it rains, because it only rains every 30 seconds, the internet goes to crap. I think closing this out with this last comment from Peter, I like the idea of storing your IR plan and continuity plan with your insurance agent. That's in case of, break glass kind of thing. I like it. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate you. Make sure, I got to do this. I'm sorry. Make sure you like and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. Got to do it. Reach out to these guys. Reach out to me. I'm all over the place. Let us know what's important to you. Let us know what you want to see next. Actually, Jeremy from Blue Mira, proper pronunciation, he told me in chat, is going to be on one of these coming soon too. We appreciate you. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Stay safe.